Hi everyone, it's Elise from Kit and Clouder Colouring Classes, and today I'm going to be showing you some simple colouring techniques for how to colour water on any of your images at all. Now this image that I'm colouring up here today is actually our July 2021 colouring class from Markers, featuring this gorgeous image by Lily of the Valley. And this technique is actually a preview from one of the chapters, so it's one of the little techniques that's being taught. So if you'd like to colour the rest of the image with me, you can find the full class over at kitandclouder.com. It's a great class for beginners, as I'll be breaking down every single element to the very basics, just like I'll be doing in today's video. And I'll be teaching you how to create all of these scene details that you can apply behind absolutely any image after class. Now, if you're already a class member and you're seeing this video, breaking your classes into smaller goals like this can be a great way to start if you're nervous or only have a limited amount of time. Don't forget, 10 minutes of coloring is all you need to make a start and to take a mindful break for you to recharge and de-stress. So let's go ahead and jump in. Okay. So before we get started, we do want to touch on a little bit of art theory. So in our classes, we always go over art theories and fundamentals to help you continue to improve and grow. It's all about the why behind what you're doing, not just the how. One of the most important things to create depth in your projects is incorporating something called light source. Now, light source is anything in our scenes that give you light. So you've got the sun in the sky, the moon, overhead lights in your ceiling, torches, candles, anything that provides light. And we know that with light, it allows us to see objects, and it's what gives objects form or definition. Now, we typically work with what's called ambient lighting in our classes. Now, ambient lighting is big cones of light that come over an entire image like this and illuminate everything. You may have watched videos before if you're new to colouring and say they've gone, okay, light's coming from over here, so this side light, this side dark. That's not really how light source works in real life. This is how directional light works, so something like a torch or where you're shining a specific beam. Ambient light comes down and washes over everything, and what happens is anything that's raised up and popping out, the light rays come down and they hit that first, making it appear a lot brighter and lighter. So that is actually called a highlight. So again, when you come to color your images after class, think about what's popping out towards you, what's raised up towards those rays that come down and hit it. The opposite of that is your shadow. So shadows are parts that are further back or curving or slanting away from the light. So they get the light rays last. Now, in between highlight and shadow, you have midtone. And midtone is the true color of the object because it's not affected by light or shade. Now, one last thing we do want to talk about that is very important, and it's the number one thing that I see people leave out of their coloring, and then they come to me and say, why aren't I getting that depth? And it's cast shadow. So cast shadow helps to show the levels and distance between objects in your projects. It really amps up the dimension. So let me explain this for you. I'm holding my little thing over my hand here, and can you see the shadow that's on my hand? That's a cast shadow. It's a shadow that's cast by an object in front or above onto the object below or behind. So always what's behind or below gets the shadow on it. Now, the closer my objects are together, the darker and harder that shadow becomes. And notice as I pull them away, the softer and more dispersed they become. And even there's a gap between that top object and that shadow as well. So that's showing the distance between the objects, and it makes the objects stand out at their respective levels. So again, we're going to go over this a lot today during the class. So if that's overwhelming right now, don't stress too much. The more we do it and you see it in application, the easier it gets. Okay, so when we come to color the water like this, a lot of it's going to depend on if you have anything in the water. So you can see here the little rocks that I have. Any objects in the water are going to usually create ripples unless the water is dead still. And it's okay to color the water as still, but when we do our coloring, it's nice to add things in like ripples so we can create movement through the water, which always makes it look a little bit more realistic and detailed. Now, when you have an object in the water, typically what will happen is the ripples will be oval around the object. So you'll notice here with this little one, I've got a shadow straight underneath, and that's like that cast shadow we were talking about earlier. So the rock would be casting a shadow onto the surface of the water. Then we leave a space and you've got the ripple around. Now, depending on how much movement the water has will depend on how many ripples it has. So something small like this, when we've got a stationary rock, the water's moving past the rock, which is what's creating the ripple, but the object itself doesn't have any movement. So the movement around the rock is actually quite minimal, and that's why we only really have like the one ripple around. If the object itself was moving or there was a splash or something like that, we might have, say, 2 or 3 ripples around here showing even more movement. So this is quite smooth and basic, just showing a bit of that water movement around the rock. You'll notice the shape wider on the sides and closer in toward the object in the front and back. So this is usually the shape of the ripple. So it's that oval shape and the sides will be wider out. Now, colors that I'm going to be using, don't be afraid to get a little bit deep in the ripple area. We want to have contrast between light and shade to be able to show the differences in the heights. I always get people that come to me and say they want to be able to create a lot of depth and dimension, but when we aren't really coming in with a lot of depth in our darker colors, then we're not able to really see or read that as much. So we really do want a nice contrast between light and shade in order to help us get there. Now you'll notice that I'm using the E40s, 50s, and a little bit of B000 as well here today. If you're new to how your markers work and how to create blends, we have a great video called Making Blends with Markers that will really help you to choose how the colors go together, because this combination may feel like it's jumping around a little bit for you if you are a beginner. So if you are struggling with how to make blends, please do review this video, and it has some really great tips for how you can start to create color blends. I also have free color blend charts over on my website at kittyandclouder.com. Click the blend charts tab and you'll find a whole lot of color blends there that you can use for your projects as well. All right, but let's go ahead and jump in. So I'm going to pop this off to the side. Okay, so let's start by drawing in the ripples. Now, if you're a little bit nervous, you can start with a lighter color. This can always be really helpful if you're mapping in a lot of ripples and you're not quite sure what it's going to look like. Because if you're unhappy with anything, you can always restart. No one's going to be able to see what you do with this color by the end. So I like to start with the objects in the water first. So I'm going to come around the rock. Now remember, wider on the sides, and then in the middle, I'm just going to come straight underneath like that. Okay, now we're going to leave a space. Now you can see the artist has already drawn the first ripple line for us, so we're going to use that. And then we're going to come out on the sides. Now remember, the sides wider, so you can see I've left more of a gap around the outer edge. With the ripple as well, we'll blend away from the object. We can do the same on this other side. Now that is sort of cutting into the water bank for us there, but you can see we can just fit it in, and a little bit of a ripple at the back. We've got another rock down the side here as well, so we can do the same sort of thing. Okay, now I'm going to come along the water edge. Typically will be darker along that edge there. And we can start to extend some strokes into the rest of the water area, so you can start to break it up and add that detail. Use any lines that the artist has given you. We don't really want to ignore these because they do suggest that there's detail. But I'm starting to fill the space in and around the objects that are there. Now I'm going to come up and behind my base here. So even when the space is small, still be thinking about adding in that detail. We want consistency throughout the whole project. That's always what's going to make it look the most natural. Alright, now once you've done that and you're happy with everything, we can come back and darken up those ripples that we've created. So I'm starting with a bit of B45, and I'm just going to add this to the very crease of the ripple area. So you can treat these almost like folds in an outfit. It's probably the best way to explain it. It's like we're getting folds in that water. The darkest part is going to look like the part that's furthest down, like a little crease like this. Lighter parts will look like they're popping out toward us. Now, my ripples are mainly horizontal, but in saying that, you can get a little bit of bump and movement here. Again, that'll impact whether the water looks like it's moving quite a lot or whether it's quite flat. Remember, if your markers are very new, uncap both ends of the marker so you don't get any drops. A little bit of evaporation happening. Mine almost blobbed on my work just then. It's that excess alcohol. All right, come in and around. Alright, next color, B52, straight over the top and extending a little further. So as you extend further, you're starting to fill the space in the water. Multiple strokes to get the transition between the colors smooth. So you're going over the previous color, doing multiple strokes back and forth until you see the line of the color underneath soften. And that's when you know you can move on to the next color in the blend. B41 is next. And you can see we're coming over what we've done previously and again pulling that further out, starting to get that coverage over the paper. Notice that a lot of these ripples come in and they have this sort of a motion. So we've got the ripple here and the ripple here. They're not joining like this. They're offset back. So you get that sort of snaking effect. That always looks really nice with water, and again, it helps to really give you that illusion of movement rather than just flat. And then I like to bring it really nice and white in the highlight. And as we do that, even leave a tiny, tiny little bit of white. That's going to increase your contrast again even more and help you get that little pop and gleam and glisten reflection of light on the surface of the water. So you can see I blend it out, but I just don't cover everything the whole way. I'm happy to leave those tiny little pops of white. Now with markers, you can always go back and repeat again to build up extra depth. So if you feel like it's not quite as strong as you'd like, again, feel free to repeat and build that color up. But that is really simply how to create a water effect. And you can use this on any body of water that you come across and adjust the detail to suit. If you'd like to color the rest of this image with me, please head to kitandclouder.com to view our new coloring class on sale until August the 14th, and you'll receive lifetime access to do this class at your own pace. We'll be breaking down all the very basics in this class, so it's a great one for beginners, and there are no lock-in contracts or time frames whenever you take our classes as well. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson and look forward to coloring with you next time.